Welcome back for another installment of Fellowship of the Rink. Joining me today in Joe's stead is another credentialed media member covering your Minnesota Wild and a great friend of the Soda Pod, going back however long we've been running this thing, who you can expect to see doing far more collaborative efforts across both of our channels this upcoming season. We've got Seth Toupal of Locked On Wild. What's going on, buddy?
Hoppy, what is happening? Hard to believe we're already through the middle of June. The draft is going to be here in literally next week. So I was going to say it's going to be here in a couple. No, it's next week.
It's here. Yeah.
Free agency after that. And so we hit kind of that spike of the off season. Then it'll go quiet for a bit again. Then before you know it, we'll be ramping up for training camp and the start of another season.
It's the ever continuing cycle. It'll never be different because the NHL is too stubborn to try and make it better. So yeah. Here we are.
And I'm one of the people who, like, we'll get to next week and the draft will start and I'll just be yelling in the background, like, can we get a minute? Can we just enjoy the summer for a second?
Yeah, pause.
But we never do.
Never do. Well, we got to ask you a couple of the questions that we ask our typical interview guests, just to, stay on brand. You and I have talked about this one plenty, but interesting is the word that typically gets thrown on top of the Minnesota Wild logo. I want your take on the logo in general, but first, try and dig back and give some honesty. First time you ever saw it, what did you think it was?
So I saw the landscape first. When I first saw it, I saw all of I saw the pieces before I saw the whole picture. And I can't remember exactly when it came about, but I know I did have somebody pointed out to me that there's a bear in there. And I'm like, oh yeah, there is. The Minnesota Wild logo is a Rorschach test. Basically, it is just presented out there. There are a bunch of different things that you can see, and it's kind of like you just see what you want to see in it. And I have always been kind of like, it's fine. It's, as a logo, it's fine, but I think we got a good taste of just how many people out there are like, we could probably do better.
Do they think we could do better with the logo or the color scheme or both? Like, where do you rank them as far as fan outrage, though? Like, do they care more about the colors or the logo?
I feel like the colors draws more ire because I see a lot of people who say, leave the North Stars in the past, start your own chapter. And honestly, for me, colors wise, I just see Green Bay. I see Green Bay Packers in the colors, and I'm like, I can't really get behind that.
Edina, Subway, any bit.
Yeah,
it's not me being against the nostalgia or whatever for people, but I always thought that the best part of the North Stars was their logo.
Yeah, I would agree.
And that's never coming back.
No,
it's the name.
It is tattooed all over the Dallas Stars franchise. We're never getting that one back.
Nope. So what can you do? But so what do you think? Obviously you're not as big of a fan of that color scheme. Do you like the current color scheme, jersey design, any of that?
Pieces of it. There have been some jerseys with the color scheme, like I think of the Reds, and I'm like, okay, now we're talking. But it seems like they've kind of gone, maybe too far in one direction, then they back off. Then they go a little further down, like they went with the red. Then, okay, let's pull that back a little bit. Now we got mostly white. Okay, now let's push to mostly green. And so I think we've kind of gotten over the last 20 plus years a good look at like the furthest you can go into those. And now it just kind of feels like time to try something new.
I'm all for bringing back the green script jerseys or adopting the Iowa Wild wheat instead of white. But I don't know. Russo says that like one of the best jerseys in the league is the current road whites. So I don't see those getting replaced anytime soon, apparently.
Yeah, I don't see them doing it. I mean, if we were even questioning it a little bit, the response last week, I think pretty emphatically slammed that door shut.
I don't know, dude. It was 50-50. Like everyone was either super excited or super pissed off, and there wasn't much middle ground.
Yeah, and then for Russo to dig in and get from his sources and the organization being like, we have no plans to do this anytime soon. But, okay,
what can you do? All right.
Yeah.
So I mean that's as far as the Wild Talk is going to go today. Pre-interview, which we'll have that teed up here for you guys soon. Other question we ask everybody, Seth. And it sounds like you've got several, but what are your top couple of nerd itches? Like it could be a movie series, book series. Do you collect stamps, Pokemon cards? I don't give a shit. What are you into?
So right now, biggest one on my plate is probably The Boys, the Amazon show. Phenomenal. And so I was getting real excited for the return of that show for season 4. And I love when series do this, where they release a couple of episodes at once to kind of give you enough time to get fully pulled back in before they go to once a week. I'm fully back in. Like it.
But hang on, spin zone though, Seth. What if I told you instead of releasing, let's call it 3 that one day, what if I told you could have had episode 1 2 weeks earlier?
I would have probably taken that, because
that's my point. That's why, like, I would almost argue against the dropping them out once. It's like, no, if you're gonna do that, like, just stretch it forward, stretch it towards us.
A little. I would have rather started to eat the breadcrumbs a couple weeks earlier than just here's a big crumb. Now you got to wait a week.
Are you a big rewatch guy? Like, do you have to go back and at least watch the previous season before watching the new one, or do you just go in and you're ready?
I watch a couple of episodes. I might pick one in the beginning and one in the middle of the previous season just to kind of jog the memory back. But series are doing, I think, a better job of really, here's what you missed. Like let's pull you back in.
Yeah, but I like some of the like deeper intricacies too that you don't catch in those recaps. Like and I'm not going to sit here and like staunchly defend House of the Dragon, because like admittedly it's disappointed me a little bit, but like I had to go binge watch the entire first season before jumping into the second. And it's like, there's little things you pick up on that you didn't see the first time. And it's like, oh shit. But it's also like just good to get the full, like watching a recap doesn't get me in the same emotional state. Like I watched through the whole season and I'm like feeling the ups and downs, the whole ride. And like, I understand where all the characters are at emotionally much better than, hey, here's a 3-minute recap that shows you the key moments and the things you have to know to be ready for this season. Like I need to be in the feels. Otherwise I'm not going to buy in as much.
I'm glad you brought up House of the Dragon, because as somebody who basically live watched Game of Thrones on Twitter for everyone else's enjoyment within the last, like, God, was that 2 years ago already at this point, or was that last year? But I was hugely in on Game of Thrones, and I'm going to be fully honest here. I watched part of House of the Dragon season 1. I couldn't finish it.
That's okay. I only watched the first season of The Boys, and I couldn't proceed past that. So,
well, then
I didn't hate it. I just like it left me in a spot where I was like, I don't need to keep watching. Like if I was like, if my wife was into it, or if I was in college and like I had a roommate that was watching it, like I'd watch it with them. I'd be fine with it, but I didn't feel the obligation to continue to trek forward. I'm like, I got a pretty good idea how this show works. I'm kind of over it, but it's a cool, like dark spin on superhero stuff, but I don't know. It hit in moments and it fell flat in moments for me. And I just like didn't ever get that full adrenaline rush where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm about this.
It's for me, as somebody who has really, like, I was fully into OG Marvel, like the Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man, fully into that phase 1, phase 2, pretty solidly in. And then they just, ever since they went to the multiverse stuff, they really have lost me. So The Boys was a nice kind of flip. Like we have all these instances in which superheroes are just like 100% like to protect us, here to save us. And the fact that the boys was like, what if they're not? Was just
way more realistic too.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
No one is that pure and
No.
just and like, oh no, I'm only here to do the right thing. Like, no, there's better and worse superheroes probably, but like to see the inner struggle, the ego, how am I benefiting from this? How do I monetize this? Like, what can I get away with because of who I am? Like I loved the perspective. Delivery just missed for me personally.
Yeah, and as they go, they're starting to get more and more into the Homelander, like hanging on for dear life to his like psyche, trying to keep it together, and the moments where it starts to kind of break are really fun. So that's been a nice, refreshing push away from the cookie cutter model for superhero movies that we get. Like I know DC has always been, we're going to be dark, we're going to be gritty, we're going to be how superheroes should really be, and then all their movies mostly flop.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Well, I like that. Ooh, this is good. Next time you jump on, whether it's here or with me and Isha on some of the other shows, we'll just like pick a new nerd itch each time, because that was a good one. That got us some good coverage. But let's get through. Everyone wants to hear the interview. And before we do that, we've got to talk about the Stanley Cup Finals. We saw Game 4. As this episode drops, Game 5 is tonight. Was this the true representation of the gentleman's sweep? And we're just going to see a Game 5 bludgeoning from Florida? Or does Edmonton actually have the momentum to push this forward and get us to a Game 6 or a Game 7?
See, it's interesting because it feels like Edmonton was doing a lot of the things in Game 4 that they were doing in Games 1 through 3. They just were finally capitalizing on those opportunities. And Sergei Bobrovsky, on the flip side, he was making some fantastic saves in Games 1 through 3, and in Game 4, it just seemed like Edmonton kind of got to him. And so, is this something that is sustainable for Edmonton? I would say I still think Florida is going to be able to take care of business. I would expect, based off of what we've seen through the first 4 games, I would expect that they would still take care of business in 5. Edmonton is just too good of a team to kind of roll over and die. You know, like they were too good to just get swept in 4 games. But I think Florida is great at adjusting, bouncing back. And I still think some of those deficiencies for Edmonton are still there. It's easy to mask a lot of that when you jump on a team right away and you beat them 8-1. Like, that stuff is all still there. It's just a matter of them probably taking out some frustration, capitalizing on those opportunities. I would still say Florida in 5.
I think the first period's pretty much going to tell us the whole story. Like, either Edmonton's going to come out and be absolutely buzzing and put a couple in early and have you be like, oh shit, this is them. Or if it's even balanced or competitive in the first period, give a light lean to Florida, whatever. I gotta imagine Florida's taking this down. Like you said, the coaching, unrivaled. I still can't believe that our boy Dev from Wild Takes actually like came at me when I said Maurice was a top 5 coach when he left the Jets, and he like got mad at me. He's apologized since, but it's just, you've got the players too, the right brand, the right identity, where they can look past this. Like, they can shake that game off and come back and be fine. And you wonder too, I mean, Shania Twain, obviously, you know, a big home advantage, but also just some players apparently have come out and said they were like kind of like starstruck. Not starstruck's the wrong word, obviously, but like their family being in the arena, like everyone going in case they won.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were a little caught off guard with that and didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
And now they've got those jitters out. They're going home. I definitely lean towards Florida winning this one, but it's one of those weird ones where like either Florida clinches this and it's over, or Edmonton wins and it all of a sudden gets really interesting with Edmonton going home and anything can happen in a game 7 and the following game. Like, I don't know. I cannot see a world where Florida loses 4 straight, but it'd be a lot more exciting if we at least got to a game 6 and we can talk about it.
Yeah. And this is always, this is that old adage every time where a team that gets into a clinching scenario, if you lose a close game, like if Florida would have lost this game in OT, by a goal, we are having a much different conversation. But it's the fact that they got kicked in this one where those seeds of doubt start to kind of creep in a little bit. But I feel like this is a perfect opportunity for Florida to exert some of their will physically to be able to say, all right, you guys are going to come out guns a-blazing. We'll knock you down a peg. And you throw everything you have at us. We'll take it, and we'll come back out and take the lead, win the game. So I like Florida's ability to kind of handle Edmonton that way. And you see this in the playoffs periodically where there's a blowout in a series like this just because one team finally breaks through, a lot of frustration, and Florida, it was pretty set after a while that, okay, this game's well out of hand. So, yeah.
And I mean, Pete Blackburn pointed it out online too. Like, basically the NHL is following the NBA script. So I'm just going to watch and see what happens in game 5 of Celtics series. And I'm going to heavily bet whatever happens in that.
How crazy
in game 5 for
how crazy is it that both series were 3-0 and both teams with the 3-0 lead got run out of the arena?
They were embarrassed. So I'm gonna ride that narrative. We're gonna see what happens. So everyone that's listening to this on Tuesday, basketball game's already been played. If Celtics won, I'm betting Florida. If Celtics lost, I'm betting Edmonton, and I'm not gonna defend it. That's just the logic is the way I see it.
Ride the hand. If the hand looks the same as yours, ride it.
Oh man. Well, what everyone's been waiting here for, we have a great interview here that Joe Smith and I banked a couple weeks ago with fearless leader of this blooming prospect pool, a Mr. Jud Bracket. This interview with Jud Bracket is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it. That makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com. Throw in promo code SP10 to take 10% off your entire order. Joining the show today is one of us by way of serving 4 seasons as director of amateur scouting for your Minnesota Wild, Jud Bracket. Thanks for joining us, Jud.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
We start with this question for everybody. And you've probably got a little bit more familiarity than some of the prospects that we've pulled in recently. But first time you ever saw the unique Minnesota Wild logo, what'd you think it was?
One, love the colors, but I'm not going to lie. It took me a minute to dig a little deeper into the logo and find the Wild. I saw more, the animal than the forest in the backgrounds. But I love it. I love the colors. And obviously when we get into some of the retros, it really pops. So huge fan of the logo, huge fan of the name and the unis, and I know the players are as well.
There we go. And we usually follow that up with asking people about their nerd itch, just given Fellowship of the Rink, kind of our nod to Lord of the Rings. We know you're a nerd itch, Jud, so let's just go into it. I actually went out last summer, did a whole East Coast trip, and visited our prospect guy who runs another show for us on here, Massachusetts native. We went out to the port, and we had the first recommendation there. The scallop risotto is fantastic. Got to ask a couple of questions off that, though. And this one he asked me to come in with. Are you familiar with the existence of a podcast called Judd'z Budz? How do you feel about the name?
I love the name. I am familiar with it. It's funny because, when I first, got to Mini, my brother and others were like, wait, are you doing a podcast too? Like, what is, I was like, it's not me. It's listen, if I was going to have a pod, I think my name's taken. That's where I would go. But, great work there. I love the passion. I love the, informative, informative nature of it. But of course the name is killer.
Well, hey, if you ever need to jump in and scratch that itch, you can certainly join on Judd'z Budz. That might break the internet though.
Amazing.
Second question. Now that I've gone and I've had the number one recommended dish, when I go back, what's the second best dish at the Port? You know what? For 22 years, we've never been able to take this item off the menu, despite the chef wanted it to come off. Tired of making it, but the pistachio encrusted halibut is our best seller, bar none. It is every year. It's funny though. Our chef's like, "Can we take it off the menu this year, please?" I'm like, "You can't. Like, we're a tourist destination, so some people are only there, a couple times, maybe once a summer." And they count on it. So we took it off, to start one summer, and the backlash was enormous. We had to have it back on the next week. Good problems. Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about as we get into the summer season and the Port being a hot spot again? No, great kickoff. Memorial Day weekend, obviously, sort of the big weekend to kick off summer. Still waiting for school to get out, but weather's been great, unusually unseasonably warm in Massachusetts this spring. So it's gotten people down to the Cape and certainly helped, get a quick start to the spring. Nice.
Well, you do have a pretty busy day job. When you're not scouting, you had a busy week last week, the scouting combine. And I was curious from your perspective, like, I'm sure people have their lists already before the combine. Like, what's the value of the combine? And do you have an example, maybe a player that maybe rose from those interviews or vertical jumps that you saw or whatever like that all of a sudden was like, okay, this is why the combine's here and why it works?
Yeah, we met the week before in St. Paul to put our finishing touches on our final list together. But between now and Vegas, there'll be changes. There'll still be more discussions, and the combine is a big piece of that too. Not that there's going to be a big jumper that someone from the third round is going to jump into the first round, but we do a lot of work during the season and interviews. So we want high character, we want coachability, we want guys with some internal drive, and it's a long road, right? From being 17, 18 to when it's time to contribute for the Minnesota Wild. It's a long road, and there's ups and downs. So we want to make sure that there's stick-to-itiveness, there's coachability, there's responses, there's resiliency. So we do a lot of work during the year, but it's one more touch point at the end of the combine, right? It's only 20 minutes, but we've done a lot of work. So we generally jump into where a discussion left off during the season, maybe with a coach, maybe with the player specifically, maybe something we saw in the playoffs that we want to talk to them about, or throughout their season. And it's always great to see, the athleticism as well, right? Who's in the early stages, who's already physically mature, where their strengths are, any deficiencies maybe in the function movement of their body. But overall, it's part of the snapshot, right? We're trying to gather as much information as we can all year long, not just in the rinks, but away from the rinks. And the combine gives us one more layer for us. Look into any history on injuries. You look at your NCAA championship this year with David Carl. That's where his health issue was discovered, was at the combine. As unfortunate as it is, but that's, it's one more chance for us to just pull back that layer a little further and make sure that everything under the hood is good.
And like they always talk about the fun or weird questions that are asked. I know the Canadians ask about what animal would you be? And like, I think the last one we heard this draft was, what's your Uber rating? I don't think that was you guys, but like,
that wasn't us.
I wasn't sure if, like, you probably won't share what question is kind of off the ball that you ask. If you can't share that, can you maybe describe like what you guys or teams are trying to get out of those kind of questions that are trying to maybe throw them off their mark a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's important to make the player at ease a bit, right? We want to get a nugget from them. We want them to feel comfortable. It's it's not the rehearsed answer that they've worked on with their agent and and mom and dad all week. And right, when I get asked, what's my greatest quality? What am I going to say? And I've said it, 26 times this week. We want them to feel comfortable. So if a question like that gets them to, stop for a minute, think on their own, not necessarily have a planned answer, that can help create that mood. But there's other ways to do it. Like Billy's great at it. He'll always ask guys, what they're watching on Netflix, and, just make a connection with them that, that we can then talk about what the show is, who the characters are, and kind of ad lib from there.
Like Hunter Haight was just on our pod, and he told a story about on his interview, like the Billy showed up late and he came from behind a curtain and said, "Hey, what's up? Where is he?" Was that a planned part of like the whole making him think thing, or was that Billy just kind of running late from something?
Just I do remember it. I think Billy was just behind the curtain because he had to duck out quick for a call, and then it just played perfectly into his character and popped out at him. But it takes Hunter. He's like, all right, these guys are normal. I can just have a conversation with them. I don't have to, my shoulders can drop a little here, and I can just have a conversation and let them, learn a little bit about me.
That's awesome. And I love your Twitter bio, Judd. Talent sets the floor, character sets the ceiling. Talk about that a little bit, though. Like, what are the most important characteristics for you as you're going about scouting all these players?
Yeah, I mean, we're a draft and development league, right? We're not drafting players and plugging them directly into our roster. So at the end of the day, we're picking a 17, 18-year-old player and projecting outward. What can they be? What do we, where do we see them fitting in our team, not just on the ice, but in the locker room too? And our coaching staff, is our development staff, are they going to enjoy the next couple of years working with them? Are they going to have to keep and poke and prod and, pull stuff out and remind them that they need to touch base? We want guys that are committed to this process, and it's a journey, right? And like we said, there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, and we're going to share them all with them, but we want to be there to pick them up and push them, along the way. So it's really important. I do, like, there is a benchmark level of skill in order to play. But I do believe that your resiliency and your character is going to be part of what defines your ability to reach your goals.
Because I covered the Lightning for a long time, and I followed one of their amateur scouts like for a weekend, and they went through Rink with them. They showed me kind of like different characteristics or factors that they, every team has a different priority of which is more important, like this versus this, and like a weighted factor. And I wasn't sure if, like, in general for you guys as an organization, is it like skilled in character than this, or like, like there's like probably like a weighted in different ones. Like, you have to be skilled enough to be able to be drafted, but is it like the speed the next one, or is like this, size is like maybe not as maybe overrated, I guess, in certain respects?
Yeah, I think the one that's hardest to define is hockey sense, and that's probably the one you can't live without, right? You have to have hockey sense. You have to be able to insert yourself into the game, play multiple positions, understand what's happening around you. So hockey sense for me is critical. It trumps everything. It generally it's what allows someone who might be smaller or slower or maybe even less skilled to still perform, because they can just process the game at a different rate. So yes, there's a baseline to everything. There's a baseline in terms of how much skating, what's the cutoff? Where are you just too slow to possibly continue to perform? But most of these things are improvable. If you want to work on it, we've seen it. There's been guys that have made major leaps in skating. And again, that's where we go back to character, right? Are you willing to put the work in? Are you willing to, to do it when you don't feel 100%, when you're sick, when you're, still trying to make that climb to the National Hockey League? So it depends upon how much that fire burns inside you and that internal drive.
What's your take on this year's draft? You talk to different experts, and they say it's like a top 12 picks, and then there's a little bit of a drop off. Some say there's 14, 15 guys that are in that kind of range, and then there's a little bit of a drop off. Like, where do you feel about you guys at 13 of what kind of player you might be?
Yeah, I think we're in a good spot. There's as you mentioned, I think there's a couple at the very top of the draft, and then there's a very good, strong middle section of this first round. And I think we're firmly in it. I like this draft. It's interesting. I think players kind of come from all over. If you look just at the sort of under 18 age group in Halinka, or maybe even the April U18 World Championships, not everyone was there. So, when you look at the talent level, at times when you leave a tournament, you might wonder, all right, how's this going to shake out? And then you're like, okay, look at the guys that playing in the NCAA. Look at the guys that were still in the CHL playoffs. I think it's a strong draft, and it's amazing how many of these guys are now starting to play in men's leagues over in Europe. It's incredible because the skill level's there, and these guys can handle it, so they're getting opportunities sooner.
What's your feel on being able to? Would you guys be interested in potentially moving up? Is there like a certain few players in that range where is this a draft where you're more likely to do that? Or is it more likely
we'd love to. Every year we identify sort of the lines in the first round of where you would move up, where do you stand still, where maybe you trade back. But we'd love to. I think the problem is going to be is the teams that are in those spots are very happy with their choices that they have. Billy's very active. If we encourage him to make a call on a trade up, he's never afraid to do it. It's actually it's really refreshing. Like he'll pick up the phone and get turned down and no problem, pick it up again and call. So from that standpoint, he's very active. He'll listen to us. We'll identify it. I think the chance to move up there is going to be difficult. You have teams that have eyes on players that they like, and as you mentioned, we're 13. So if that range is 12 to 14, most teams are liking the players in their grouping.
So in that respect, is it maybe more likely you could potentially move back if you have players maybe fall that you in that same pot of players that you like?
Yeah, that's the trick of as the draft starts to unfold, there's usually a line of where you want to stand still and get a player from, and if that for some reason it the players that we're sort of eyeballing start to go sooner than we expected, then yeah, we have to make a decision on the floor there and and see if we can find a partner. It's never as easy as it sounds, right? Like we can fantasize about trades, but if you don't have a partner, nothing's happening.
Yeah, that's fair. And for you specifically, Judd, like post draft, you've got all your guys coming out of the 2024 season. How involved are you personally with that player's development moving forward? Like, do you weigh in on their development path, or are you just immediately cutting ties and you're moving on to the next crop?
Immediately they're handed over to our development staff, who are great. And they work with them. And these, like I said, there's weekly touch points with them. They're outstanding. They're out traveling, seeing the players, catching them on, at home games, road games, spending some time with them away from the rink. But at the same time, I still see them. Our amateur staff still sees them. So we still, make sure that we're checking in with them, and feedback too, right? If we happen to see a positive, negative, we're always sharing that information with our development staff too. We've got a really good relationship with the development staff. It goes back and forth. They're out seeing games too. So we want to know, not just our prospects, but when they're at a game, hey, is there anyone that stood out to you? So it's definitely a collaborative effort that way, and the flow of information is continuous.
And I know you obviously still follow these guys and take a lot of pride in guys that you picked and move forward. And I was curious what your thoughts are on Rossi's development, or where I'm sure in the beginning, even for himself, there was some frustration, and people wanted him to get there right away and be the number one center right away and do that. Like, it takes some time, but what have you thought about his kind of progression from?
I think Marco is shown a lot of what we thought he would be, in terms of the timeline to get there. To me, that's not as important as that he's the player that we wanted him to be, expected him to be, thought he could be. You still see the same hallmarks in the hockey sense and the two-way play and the details of him, and he's always been a point producer, and he continues to be. So I think he's, performing very, very well. Obviously we've seen, he had his own health concerns, but even just the COVID effect on players and their development, it's, that draft class for some of the guys, it's been a little slower, for a top 10 group. And it doesn't mean that the high side's not there. It doesn't mean they won't achieve their potential. It just means, there's a year of lost development. So it's, the path here has a little hiccup in it for a few of them. And, you're still seeing guys really hit those marks, and it takes time. It takes opportunity. It takes confidence. And I think that's the most, one of the most important things is watching him play and the confidence he's gaining, because with that is going to be continued growth.
I know it could be a good example. I know they're two different players, but for a Charlie Stramel, for example, judging a guy early on versus waiting, what's your take on where he is right now? He's always transferred to Michigan State. I heard he had a tough time in Wisconsin in terms of getting playing time or being using the right way. But what's your feel in a year or so later, kind of where he's at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for Charlie's upcoming year. I'm not a huge fan of the portal in college, but I do think in Charlie's situation, this is exactly what it's for. This is someone who committed to a different coaching staff, and the opportunity situations changed, and he's had the ability to make a decision, which is great for him. He's now going to go play for his former coach. So immediately there's trust, there's confidence, and with that, it's going to be opportunity. So I'm really excited. Now he has to go do it too, right? This isn't all about what he didn't get. He's got to go out and do it. And I'm excited for him. I think he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and I'm excited for what this year looks like for him. But look, this is all part of Charlie's faced some challenges early. Some guys face them later. So this is all part of the process. The linear draft development isn't linear. So for him, he's had some, emotional challenges. He's had now some physical challenges this year. So now can we overcome all those and still become the guy that we envision? We believe so. And he's got our full support, and, we're really excited about this year for him.
Who is that guy you envision? Like, what's the profile? Like, how do you see him fitting into an NHL roster? I don't care if it's 1 or 2 years, 5 years, like when he's there, what player is he?
I mean, obviously the first thing that comes out to you is the physical nature of him, right? And it's not just the size and strength, but it's his mobility. He's got to be abrasive. He's got to be playing hard. He's got to be playing downhill on the forecheck. Charlie's game is never been a stats. He's a point of game player, right? But he's abrasive. He's hard to play against. He's an effective penalty killer. So those guys are hard to find, especially in a 6'3", 220-pound package that moves as well as he does. If we go back to this time last year, Charlie was one of the guys who really did well at the combine, right? So he's not just a big body; he's an athletic body. So it's size, strength, compete. It's being abrasive. It's really fitting a lot of the identity that that Bill Guerin has built here in Minnesota.
And I think I was at the draft too, and you guys talked about how much you liked him for a lot of different reasons, but also I think Guerin mentioned is filled a positional need too up the middle that's important for you guys going forward. And I was curious where you fall in general on that, like the whole debate of positional need in a system versus best player available, and like how you kind of weigh that each year, kind of based upon what's going on.
Yeah, and in the perfect where we can find the balance. We can find someone that is the best player available and fits a positional need or a size strength need or speed need. So we're always talking about our prospect pool and maybe where it's shallow and where we can make gains in a draft. But we don't want to reach too far, so we want to make sure we're still in the range of player that we think is going to be successful. And more than need, I think it's identity, right? I think there's a culture being created. There's a way, a systematic way that Bill Guerin wants this team to play and compete every night. And so when we can find the best available that also fits that, we're going to be, we're going to jump all over that. And it doesn't happen every year. Sometimes you get, a little higher here and a little lower in one area, but overall, we want to find that best, cross section of sort of identity plus best available.
And I spent some time this spring in Iowa to get a feel with the development program, but obviously new first year coach and Brett and some new assistants, and a lot of time focused on the young defensemen you have there because you have a lot of pride in a lot of those guys you guys took, Lamboses and the Rourkes and everything else like that, and just how hard it is to be a young defenseman in this league, and having a 20 versus 21-year-old as a defensive pair partner had to be tough for them early going. Like, where do you feel about where those guys are in development stages? And I don't know if that affects where they are, affects what do you look at in the draft like this year when you have 6 high-level D, if one falls to you, for example? How do you feel, about that group?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, goaltending and defense are the slowest developing positions. These guys need their reps. You look at Iowa, at times we had 4, even 5 first or second year defensemen playing, plus a first or second year goaltender, right? So these guys are taking on a lot of responsibility early, and I think it's important to be patient. I think you look at Lambos's draft. You got 2 defensemen picked in the top 10. Before him, and I think collectively they've played 45 or 50 games in the NHL. So again, he's a rookie. He's playing his first year of pro hockey. He's doing some things well. He's learning some things. He's going to have a big summer. I think, he's a student of the game. He loves it. Now it's important for him to take the next step. Is it a huge step? Is it a medium step? That's for us to continue to evaluate and work with him on. But these guys all have, big summers ahead of them. And, and I still think, you look back the effects of COVID on some of these guys, and, when you take Ryan O'Rourke, there's no hockey in the OHL the year after he's drafted. So you can't think that didn't have an effect on his growth rate.
Like, look at the guys in this year's draft, and one that's maybe more polarizing than the others, or maybe scrutinized because he's been part of the process for more than any others, is Cole Eiserman. People thought he'd be like a top 2 pick even like a year or so ago. And then you talk to different people who are evaluators, and they say like his elite level scoring, like that's such a strength for his, but they wonder about him on his defensive side. And I was curious, since you probably nitpicked him just like everybody else has nitpicked him the last couple of years. Well, what's your state or feel on him as a player and a prospect at the NHL level?
Yeah, sometimes being identified early in your development can be a bit of a curse, right? You get picked over. You can liken it a bit to maybe Phil Kessel, right? Phil Kessel was sort of a guy coming in that was super highly rated, scored a lot of goals. And so their paths have a parallel there between the two of them. But you can't deny, excuse me, you can't deny what Cole does. He's an elite goal scorer, has proven it at every level and continues to do so.
Got 2 more here for you, Judd, if you got time. One was our producer basically begged me to ask you about this, and then one that we close out for every interview. You got a sec?
Absolutely.
All right. So to lead in, our producer is from Vancouver, if that steers you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Lots of stories have been out there on what the dynamic and inner workings were. Can you just talk to me, whatever you're willing to share, about how you landed on drafting Elias Pettersson?
Yeah, I mean, we had honestly the Pettersson draft. I think is probably one of the greatest years in terms of speaking about an amateur scouting staff. We were convicted as a group, right? It started with, some of the scouts that were in Europe, with the guys that were crossing over, myself. As a group, we really just from November on, he was the guy that we just identified with on potential, on the current skill level. He was playing, in a men's league already and having success. And it was really just a matter of that we were convicted, and we went through our process. That was the player that we landed on, where we landed on our list. And it certainly felt like going into the draft, based on where we had him on our list, that he would be our selection. And it, was it felt everywhere? No, like there were some other players of interest, but I honestly, as a group, and look, that's our job. We create a list. It can be ignored. It can be skipped. We can move, to a different player. That's fine. But that as a group, that's the player that in our room that we wanted to pick. That when we went through our process, that's how our list was created. And really, I just, as a group, we were really proud to stand firm on it. It wasn't sort of a consensus pick. If you looked around from the mock draft, most people didn't have him in the top 10. And I get it. So there was some apprehension on it, but we as a group really felt firm on it and stuck to it. And I, to this day, it's, one of the more proud moments that, as a director of scouting.
It's a good one for the resume. That's for sure.
Well, and I think too, like for the Wild perspective, like the Ogren Urok draft could end up being like a really good one. I think for like your guys' staff. I don't know if you can recall like how it came together, as far as, did you wanted to pick one first, or you knew you could get maybe Urok maybe a little bit later in that draft? So,
yeah, we put our list together, but then we started to strategize, and as scouts, you try to you're trying to get as many good players as you can. So the idea became can we wait on Urok and possibly come away with these two? And we just felt, if in the other order, which was the way we had it on our list, if we had we felt there was less of an opportunity to come away with both players had we picked them in the reverse order.
You're not surprised that Ogren made an impact already on the NHL, because he already made his debut and looked like he's.
I'm not. I mean, he's you talk about when you find that cross section of, the hard skill plus the best available, like this guy brings it all the time, and he's physically developed. He's got man strength now. He moves well. I'm not surprised at all. He continues to succeed. But again, his path, right? He went from J20, then went to Allsvenskan, then to SHL. It's not a rush, right? We want these guys to be as prepared as possible so that they can be successful when they arrive, not just get there and and stick and not contribute. So we want to make sure that the development is correct, right? It's when they come that they have a chance to be successful and really impact our team.
Are you a golfer at all, Judd?
Funny you should ask. I'm not, but I am playing tomorrow. It's the manager, or at one of the managers at the restaurant. It's his 40th, so he's probably for 10 years now asked me to golf. So I'm going to golf with him tomorrow. And
so you're going to drive the cart and drink beers, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. I'll probably play 2 and then bow out.
Yeah, that's pretty much me on the course. Well, then we're going to twist this a little bit. We always ask our Waggle golf question, whichever one. Go to getyourwaggleon.com, drop in promo code SP10 to take 10% off the entire order. We usually ask what someone's dream golf foursome is, but I'll spin it for you and say, if you could have any 3 people, I don't care if it's athlete, celebrity, dead or alive, 3 people sit down with you and just chat, drink, eat at the port. Who are the 3?
Great question for one. Being a mass guy and with the success, Bill Belichick would be one. Obviously you referred to the Saban quote, and I think Bill and Saban are share a lot of the same values. So I think the conversation would take its way. I'd probably Muhammad Ali, Belichick, and maybe Anthony Bourdain.
Okay. That'd be quite a cross section of personalities there too.
Yep.
So.
Yeah,
I was really hoping that you'd include Tom Brady too, just for the awkward tension between him and Bill, but respectful that you didn't. And as I asked you that and I caught you off guard, I almost have to ask now real quick. If you were an animal, what animal would you be?
Oh. That's awesome. Well, I'm a Cape guy and we're infested with great white sharks, so I'd be a great white apex predator. They're pretty awesome too. They're everywhere on the Cape. You can see, I mean, honestly, you don't have to go very far. Probably closer to the shore than them to be right now.
That'd be a good answer for a draft pick too. I think the people would love to hear that from a draft prospect too. So it'd be great. But thanks so much for joining us after a busy week. Looking forward to checking out the NHL draft in Vegas, the last one that's kind of like of this kind. I think going forward, which will be weird for everybody. I think we used to having it in person for everybody. Now it'll be probably difficult for you guys to adjust to it, right? So
hopefully they reconsider. It's a great week for all of us as scouts and sort of a nice send off. But and Joe, I know you have a big week ahead of yourself too. So
any day.
I wish you all the best. That'll be awesome.
Thank you. We're gonna need it. We're excited. So it'll be a life changer for sure. So I will be missing the draft, but for a good reason.
Great. We'll enjoy it. It's I have 4, and it's the thing I'm most proud of is being a dad. So you're gonna love it.
Yeah, we're excited and nervous all at the same time, which I'm sure you can relate to when the day or two before. So, but always appreciate it, Jeff. Hopefully have you on again sometime, maybe during next season or something like that. So, but I appreciate you.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Oh man, I don't know. Jud Bracket is just such a dude. I don't even know how to better explain it. Like, he's just a guy, feels like one of us. Seth, you haven't even listened to the interview yet, so you can't even comment, but I know you'll be going in and listening. So we get one more download. Let's go. But everyone, if you didn't get what you needed there, I'm sure we'll be doing some follow-up discussion with him post-draft or coming up this year. But I think we're in good hands when it comes to bringing in players. And anyone that does make it out to the East Coast has to go check out the port. And if you don't understand why by now, then I'm afraid I can't help you. Now, final segment here. As always, we're going to do a little bit of a spin on it, but we have Keyboard Warriors, our hot take segment. And that is brought to you by our great friends at Barrel Theory Beer Co. And I misspoke last week, folks, because I saw a social promotion that went out a week in advance. They actually have their 7th anniversary on 7th Street this week. It all starts today as the episode drops, and they have beer releases throughout the week. They have awesome barrel-aged beers that are coming out too, for those that are like me and are sickos that go for the stronger and I'd say rich, more heavily flavored, but those barrel-aged beers, I'm telling you what, Isha and I had one a couple years ago when Isha was just visiting before moving here, and it is to this day one of the best beers I've had in my life. So I gotta imagine across their 4 releases there, I'm sure several unique IPAs and sours that'll be dropped. You need to get out there. If you want to plan around other festivities going on, what we have here for today, Tuesday, OG Zaza pizza food truck, incredible. Wednesday, get out there for disco dogs, corn dogs, and bingo from 6 to 8. Thursday, Ansari's Grill is in the house, and speaking personally, I think it's the best Greek food in the cities, so jump on that. Friday, they have Private Sector Provisions rocking their smash burgers and MN Nice Cream with ice cream sandwiches. Saturday, this is the one where Seth's going to get out. They are doing tattoos in the brew house from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And they'll have breakfast burritos, ice cream, burgers, tons of options sprinkled in throughout the day. And wrapping it up Sunday with Rectangle Pizza. That's right.
Ooh.
Nationally acclaimed Rectangle Pizza. Their breakfast pizza, dude, is it's so good. And they have That Good Brownie. If none of that was enough to entice you, I don't know what more I can say. Some of the best beers, some of the best people, celebrating 7 years on 7th Street with so many great events throughout the week. You've got to be able to find at least one that you're going to run out there for. Now, Seth, let's do this. You said you're going to come with at least 1 or 2 hot takes here for me. And I don't care if this is about the Wild, the draft, hockey, sports, food. You tell me, what do you have that's going to get me hot and bothered, or at least the listeners up in a roar?
Well, there are a lot of different ways that I could go with this. And so why don't I start with one that is going to hopefully kind of have people breathing a sigh of relief. I'm going to hot take Marco Rossi will not be traded.
I don't know if that's even a hot take anymore, but I very much hope that you're correct. Yeah. I do not want to see him go. And it's far from being something that's off the table, but it does sound like if someone's getting moved, the higher propensity guy is going to be Phil Gustafsson, which I'm still not in support of. I mean, the return for any of these guys, like if you tell me that the return is worth it, sure, I'll trade either of them, but I just don't see you getting the return that warrants moving on from Gustafsson when I don't know what your take is, Seth. I don't think that Fleury or Wallstedt are ready to handle 50% or more of the workload. And that scares me.
Which leads me to part 2. I should have prefaced this as a part 2 hot take. Someone else not named Philip Gustafsson will. That is not Marco Rossi.
Oh, will be traded. Okay. Any inklings on who you think that is?
No, but the options are limited. I look at
trade protection. Yeah.
I look at where this roster's at right now. I look at the number of players who are knocking on the door and the players who could also potentially surprise that we haven't really factored in yet, or at least many haven't. There just are a lot of spots. And
give me a real hot take then. Name a player that's getting moved. Because I'm racking my brain and I can't come up with one. So I need to hear.
I feel like it's going to be Gaudreau, even though his contract is massively immovable because
he's not getting signed anywhere.
It's just there's got to be somebody. There's got to be somebody on that roster that gets moved, and the options are just limited. I don't feel like Hartman is somebody that they're looking to move right now. Foligno, Zuccarello. I don't feel like any of those guys are on the table, but there just are so many people for so few chairs that it's just kind of leading my brain down the road of somebody's getting moved. Might not be for a big return, but just to free up a spot.
I'm just thinking through the roster, and I don't even know. Because, like, Spurgeon is one that fans would say, oh, yeah, trade him because he's hurt. No one's going to trade for him when he's hurt.
Right. Nobody's going to
trade
for him.
Two of the worst surgeries you can go through in unison, and people are going to want to see him play before they're even going to consider taking that contract because the Arizona Coyotes no longer exist, and the Utah Hockey Club is actually ready to do business and use their cap space for positive things rather than just eating dead cap. So there went your only chance at that happening. And guess what? If Spurgeon comes back and plays well, you probably don't want to trade him anyways. So that one's kind of dead to me. I think there will be prospects traded. I don't think anyone on the current roster. It's just hard for me to think besides all the discussion around Rossi and Gustafsson. Like, what? You're not going to trade Boldy. You're not going to trade any of those guys with no trades. You're not going to trade Kaprizov yet. Next summer, if he's not willing to extend, that's certainly on the table. But, like, if we want to just really get people all hot and bothered, like, okay, Jonas Brodin could get you a good return. He's on the other side of 30, and you just brought in his replacement in Brock Faber. And everyone says, oh, put them together, ultimate shutdown pair. Like, I don't know. Seems like Jonas Brodin has always been able to find a pairing mate that he can make things work with. I don't see why Brock Faber can't be the same. If you are looking to take a big swing, it moves dollars. You then are probably talking about either getting a big return when it comes to futures, or that's a way that if you want to make a big swing in this draft, that's certainly a way to do it. Or if you're looking for that hard hitter on offense, like, this is a way to bring that in if you're looking for it in the short term. Do I think they should do it or are exploring it? No. But that's the only one that, like, comes to mind where I'm like, I could see you talking yourself into it if it's not a good enough return.
And if you look at it too, so you've got Brodin at 6, you've got Spurgeon at 7.575, and now you're going to be adding Brock Faber into that mix at probably around 9. That's a lot of money for top end's defense between the three of them. So,
man, we're going to get yelled at.
this could be just a part of my brain getting ready for the inevitable John Merrill trade before the season starts.
Does that even count?
No, it shouldn't.
If you're not one of the starting 6 or starting 12, I don't count it.
It shouldn't count.
I actually hope Adam Beckman gets traded, not because I think he's a bad player, but because I want him to get a chance somewhere else. Like, I think that relationship is severed. Like, let the boy go and get a chance somewhere else. He can't shoot any more pucks in the driveway than he has already. Set him free. If you love something, you set it free.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough. I think we're going to be looking at a pretty similar roster next year, which isn't the worst if it stays healthy. But healthy. That's
not betting on the entire roster staying healthy for the entire season is not a great bet to make.
It's not a great bet. Not in a sport like hockey.
No.
That's a tough one. All right. Well, that probably got people stirred up again.
Yeah, I'm glad I left that kind of open-ended and bland so that we inevitably made our way to a Jonas Brodin trade talker that is going to definitely get some reaction.
Oh boy. Yeah, people will be calm. Everyone, make sure you go out, check out Barrel Theory. You can, as you buy your delicious beers there, you can tell Timmy how dumb you think I am for bringing up Brodin. But last piece here for everybody, gotta point you back over to The Athletic. Obviously, all of Russo's coverage of the Stanley Cup matchup between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers, he has not missed yet. And some things you can jump back and reread if you haven't had a chance to yet. I know Joe's article with NHLers giving advice for a first-time father is a great one. Anyone that's not up to speed on the chaos, the gong show that has occurred of late in the PWHL inside Natalie Darwitz's ousting from PWHL Minnesota. Again, giving you as much up-to-date information as they can there. And then Joe's write-up on our sit-down with Jud Bracket previewing this 2024 NHL draft. So get out there, check it out. I'm sure there'll be plenty more to come. If you're not subscribed already, I don't know why. The people that think that they're like above paying a couple dollars a month because, oh, it should be free. I don't know. I'm good paying a couple bucks a month if it means that I get great coverage. Seems pretty simple. But if you truly can't afford it, hey, understood. Get it. But I find that hard to believe since you probably go to Starbucks 4 times a week. So,
or more in my case.
Or more in your case. Or more in Russo's case. And that's really why we got to pay for these subscriptions, guys. So obviously we got some groups colliding here. So if you are new to the Fellowship of the Rink podcast, followed Seth over, or this just happens to be the first one you found because you search Jud Bracket regularly on Google, really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button, leave a 5-star review. Like anything you can do helps us more than you know in growing this new show going into the next season. And if video is more your thing, please subscribe to the YouTube channel at the Soda Pod, where we do full podcast recordings. We clip interviews, do beer reviews, and of course, in anticipation of the 2024 NHL draft, we have full prospect analysis and highlight reels being compiled by the infamous Spoked Z. And for our listeners who have not come across Seth in the wild, which I find hard to believe, but please be sure to give Seth some love over at Locked On Wild, be that on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I don't know, Seth, if there's anything this week that you want to pump quick.
We are continuing to just count down to the draft, and I'm just working on a bunch of different angles for just stuff to try to get ready for the season. You know, we're doing player report cards. We're doing just looks at the organization from top to bottom. Just all kind of trying to gear ourselves up for 2024, 2025, and more importantly, Operation Keep Kirill Happy. Yeah,
that's harder than some may think, but I hope you're successful in that operation. That'd be delightful.
It'd be fun. It'd be fun to be able to keep him around and just my own. Yeah, my own personal thoughts. I'm not as worried about the signing of the extension as I am about.
You want to hear some crazy shit though? So not this past weekend, but the previous weekend was my brother's wedding, and his new brother-in-law went up and like read a Bible passage, whatever, and ended it with like, and we just got Justin Jefferson locked up. Let's go. And like people were all getting excited. I had 3 different people, like my mom, my wife, and there was 1 or 2 others that like came to me directly and were like, oh yeah, you probably didn't care too much about that little addition. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, I don't know. You don't like basketball. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Oh, like, no.
That's like the Timberwolves are the thing right now. We just assumed it was about a basketballer. I'm like, oh no.
What have we done?
And then I stopped and I like asked my wife specifically. I'm like, so you don't know who Justin Jefferson is? She pauses, thinks, she's like, oh, that's who he was talking about? I'm like, he did say Justin Jefferson. Yeah. She's like, yeah, I kind of tuned that out. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, okay, this is concerning. This is the state of Minnesota sports.
That's why we do what we do.
It's great. I had to throw that in. But yes, everyone, make sure, subscribe everywhere, spread the love for all of the great hockey coverage we have here in Minnesota. But as always, we do appreciate you tuning in for this week's edition of Fellowship of the Rink. You stay classy, stay to hockey.